now, without further ado, it is my pleasure to welcome today's speaker, Matt Carmichael, editor of What the Future. Matt, you have the floor.
Hey everybody, I am Matt Carmichael, editor of What the Future, and your host today. And manufacturing is a broad topic, and we're going to cover the scale spectrum. So on one end, we have Caterpillar, which makes really big things. And as a US leading exporter, Caterpillar has manufacturing or distribution centers in nearly every state and every region of the world. A single product, however, can take multiple shipping containers to transport around the world. In the middle, we have Kimberly-Clark, which makes smaller things like toilet paper, but makes them at a really big scale. And we go down to the small scale in this issue with Dearborn Denim, which makes blue jeans and apparel, including this Henley and hoodie that I'm wearing, if you're wondering why I'm a little less formal today. But no, it's not paid product placement. I've been a customer long before I did this interview, which is why I know their story, and I'm eager to share that with you later. But even small manufacturing is changing. In the relatively small niche of US backpack makers, recent stalwart independent brands like Tom Bin, known for its great bags, but also its personal customer service touches like hand-illustrated boxes with adorable robots on it, was bought up by private equity. And Mystery Ranch, the backpack maker, was recently acquired by Yeti. You're seeing Stanley's century-old business suddenly grow tenfold by leaning into drop culture and limited edition offerings. It's interesting times, and things are shifting. The long death of US manufacturing has been greatly, not necessarily exaggerated, but misunderstood. In truth, it's a huge, steady sector in the economy, give or take $7 trillion or 11% of GDP. But what people are really talking about is a long decline in manufacturing jobs since their peak in the late 1970s, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So manufacturers, large and small, are facing a number of questions that we'll address in this issue. Will small business manufacturing survive? Will US manufacturers be able to compete on the global market? Will global brands be able to enter the US market? Or will anti-globalization sentiment make that challenging? Will we get to a more sustainable future of manufacturing? And how do you staff from a shrinking talent pool, but also a more automated workforce? Let's start on the small side. This summer, I saw where this hoodie and jeans were made, which is not something many Americans can say about their clothing. Even fewer could walk to the factory, which I took or maybe dragged my family to on a public tour last summer. On a weekday, this room would be full of workers cutting, stretching, and sewing jeans and t-shirts and other apparel. The denim, the zippers, the rivets, and leather patches are sourced from the US and Mexico, but it's all put together here at Dearborn Denim. And it's as good a place as any to start talking about our central tension in this issue, which is a tension between US-made goods and those made elsewhere. We'll talk about this more later, but made in the USA is one of the top purpose-driven drivers of purchases across any demographic you can slice. Sustainability is another key issue, as it often comes with a trade-off for price. And price in many global markets, including the US, is an ongoing concern as an uncertain economy has people making trade-offs in various line items of their budgets. Price versus quality, price versus brand preference, price versus where it's made. And in Ipsos Global Trends, we see a shift starting to develop between supporting a brand for its value and supporting a brand that delivers value. We want to support our values, but we can't always afford to walk that walk. And there's a tension as it relates to things made locally or domestically and goods made overseas. I was recently on a trip in China, and it seemed that many companies lacked confidence about trying to break into the US market. And there's good reason for that hesitation in our data. As I've said, Americans value American-made goods, but if a product is made in China, Americans are more than 5 times as likely to say they'd be less likely to buy it, 44%, than more likely, 8%. That said, we still buy nearly $600 billion of Chinese goods every year, often manufactured for brands that we've grown to trust. And while Americans see less benefits of globalization compared to other countries, they also appreciate all the inexpensive goods and quality electronics we buy from overseas. So let's close out this intro section by going back to Dearborn Denim, and I'll tell you a brand story that gives some inspiration for manufacturing on the small side. Bellroy is an Australian maker of backpacks, phone cases, wallets, and the like, founded in 2010. And the founders also started Carryology.com, to write about the things that people carry and the packs and slings they carry them in. That led to a Facebook group, now 30,000 plus strong. That led to co-branded collaborations with a host of small manufacturers and artisans in the space. And those product drops typically sell out in minutes or even seconds. It's a great example of creating an ecosystem within a niche that is both collaborative and consumerish, but also a community of collectors. It's helping support all of the businesses involved, and it's almost entirely direct to consumer and social media driven. There is a store tied to the community in Hong Kong. We'll talk about all of these themes as we go today. I don't want to spend too much time on how the sausage is made, but you'll hopefully notice a few new or redesigned features in this issue. Just like the future itself, what the future is always evolving. And here's the first change. We're showing our work again. When we think about trends and when we think about foresight, we're thinking about that in terms of the signals we're seeing. We're thinking about that in terms of the macro forces. And we're also thinking about that in terms of the shift we see in society and markets and people. Trevor Sudano and the Trends and Foresight practice of Ipsos Strategy 3 pulled these together for us. The first is a shift to a zero waste future. The global shift towards sustainability and zero waste is steering manufacturing toward a circular economic models. This approach emphasizes resource efficiency, where materials are reused and recycled, reducing waste and environmental impact. Manufacturers are adapting, but it may require substantial capital expenditures and investment in new technology and processes, and those can be big hurdles to overcome. We're seeing a shift in nationalism and globalism, and we've been talking about this one, but the long-term effects could include market inefficiencies, quality control issues, and a potential dampening of innovation due to reduced global cooperation. And finally, changing employee dynamics, which we'll cover a lot today. Labor shortages coupled with stronger employee bargaining power are poised to significantly affect manufacturing. Heightened employee bargaining could reshape workplace dynamics, emphasizing job quality and stability, potentially leading to a more skilled and satisfied workforce, but also higher operational expenses for manufacturers. Now that we've fully set the scene, let's start our discussion of the future of manufacturing with the sexy underbelly of manufacturing, which has been brought a little more into the light lately due to the pandemic, geopolitical crises, and the current attacks disrupting the Red Sea, and even a single cargo ship running aground and blockading the global flow of goods. Yep, we're gonna talk supply chain. Until the pandemic, few probably gave much thought to supply chains, but that changed as people hoarded toilet paper and shopped empty shelves. Now, consumers goods companies are making their supply chains more consumer-centric, faster, and data-driven, says Scott DeGroot, Vice President of Global Distribution and Planning at Kimberly-Clark. With businesses now returning to a more normal cycle, DeGroot has been applying new technologies and processes to make the company's supply chain more resilient, responsive, and renewable for the future. What's next is to help make the company's hygiene products more recyclable. DeGroot says there are all kinds of innovations moving through the supply chain, from robotics to data to AI. And even within their product line, different products have different needs and demands. Focusing on the customer, speed, and talent are key drivers for him. But when he spoke to Kate MacArthur, he used a phrase that makes a lot of sense to those of us who think about the future. Thinking in ranges. If you plan for absolute target, you'll likely miss. But if you think about the range of possibilities, you'll be ready. Here's what he told Kate.
One of those learnings from COVID that we are now applying across the supply chain is that the traditional lean thinking likely was carried a little bit too far, not in a conceptual way, but in a practical way, that we just applied one approach across the entire enterprise when we think about how much inventory do we need here in this spot and what the lead time was, all these things that in a traditional sense were very deterministic, it's a point in time. And what we're learning now is that we have to be much more comfortable thinking in ranges, thinking about the actual variability of any process or sub-process and how they connect together across the network. It's this idea that all the foundational concepts of lean are 100% valid, but we need to be applying them and are now applying them in ways that are bespoke or segmented. What that really means is making sure that we understand in enough detail the actual physical flow of our products from the consumer all the way back to the supplier, and the fact that they act in multiple different ways. And so we need the capability in our supply chain, and are building the capability in our supply chain to allow for that level of segmentation. The technology, the AI, the concurrent planning, the ability to do real-time scenario planning allows us to make very hopefully wise business decisions about, if we do these things, then we'll get these range of outcomes, and that's more consistent with whatever business metric we want to deliver.
Recent research from Ipsos's corporate reputation team suggests that visible and concrete action on environmental, social, and corporate governance remains a competitive advantage for brands, though some actions are more impactful than others. ESG is often flattened to environmentalism alone, says Trent Ross, an executive vice president and chief research officer for Ipsos's corporate reputation practice. But people take brands' social footprint very seriously, with 42% of respondents in Ipsos research saying that social impact should be prioritized above protecting the planet and practicing good governance. Within the subset of social concerns, citizen consumers think that most important actions the brand can take are improving working conditions, 51%, and improving worker health and safety, 47%. Still, the most important thing is to act in the first place. Such actions to support workers can also have a halo effect for manufacturers, distributors, and suppliers when dealing with their business-to-business customers and clients. Nearly 3 in 4 Americans say too many brands use the language of ESG without committing to real change. It's on the C-suite to change that perception. Small business manufacturing has seen a resurgence in the US in the last decade or two, and a lot of that is fueled by direct consumer and social media trends. Much capitalizes on the made in USA or designed locally labels as selling points. But can that momentum continue? Rob McMillan runs the small direct-to-consumer blue jean manufacturer in Chicago, Dearborn Denim. He says it's a constant struggle, but he hopes that people will continue to place a price or a premium on good products made locally that last. He told me that D2C is hard to maintain because the cost of acquisition for a customer is getting higher. With the social media landscape changing, he thinks it would be much harder to start a business like his in the future. Even just a few years ago, when he was growing Dearborn Denim, he was able to do so somewhat organically. Now, without significant investment in paid social, it's harder to build a starter base. We also talk sustainability. He wants to stay away from broad greenwashing claims, but there is truth to the fact that his supply chain is pretty tight. Materials are sourced from the US and Mexico, and for someone like me, I pick up a pair of custom hemmed pants at the store and know they were made 10 minutes from my house. Shipping in a D2C world, though, is a big balance to that. But we talked a lot about the way made in the USA is a complicated idea that means a lot of different things to different people in terms of nationalistic pride or sustainability or perceived quality and durability, or just supporting local communities. Here's what he told me.
I think made in the USA is always important. It's another source of jobs for US workers, for people living in the USA. We need more options than desk job or service industry. And that means manufacturing as one possible solution. By supporting USA manufacturing, we're creating more jobs in the USA, and that's just a good thing. I know there are some fancy economists who say, okay, yeah, but you can get the same product overseas for cheaper, and you're supporting wages in, let's just say, Bangladesh. And there's some truth to that, but I think it's okay to say that as an American, I prefer to support jobs in the USA, not only from I align with this person more just by living in the same area as them, but in addition to that, more robust economy is good for everybody living here. I think it's also important to have products that are made in the USA because I think it's important for us to just be proud of things that we produce, what comes from here, right? There's a lot of manufacturing in the USA, and I think there should be a lot more of it. So I think also just being able to produce things that we consume is important.
These topics of supply chain made in the USA and sustainability are important because consumers are no longer in the dark about how products are made. They look beyond the made in label to scrutinize the entire supply chain, demanding transparency from source to source, says Jennifer Bender, an associate partner with Ipsos Strategy 3. While many consumer opinions on globalization are rooted in political ideology, economic circumstances have a strong impact as well. For example, Made in the USA resonates with Americans who are worried about job security and their industry's ability to compete in a global marketplace. And these attitudes are continually influenced by stories about manufacturing labor and impact, both in the news and on social media. While headlines and social media driving sentiment around globalization, brands need to monitor and get ahead of potential issues at each step of the supply chain. Switching very large gears, Caterpillar makes massive things like earth-moving equipment. And again, machines that have to be broken down and reassembled from 15 cargo containers full of parts at places like hard-to-reach mines after being shipped around the world. That's big. Denise Johnson, Group President of CAT's $12 billion Resource Industries segment, oversees automation and innovation, product and operations, engineering and component development, and global strategic procurement. As a supplier of equipment, Caterpillar is helping customers meet their ESG goals, but it's not easy. If Dearborn Denim wants to produce a pair of shorts with a 9-inch inseam instead of 7-inch inseam, it can do so fairly quickly. But if a mining company wants to hit low emissions target by 2030, that's a tougher pivot for a company that usually works on longer time horizons. So as the transition to electric energy requires more mined materials, Johnson says, the nearly 100-year-old infrastructure company is leveraging technology to help its customers do that work sustainably, efficiently, and with purpose. Here's what she told Kate MacArthur.
We're certainly planning for the next year's production, 2 years production, but we look out on a horizon that's anywhere from 5 to 10 years out to be able to predict and plan whether we need to add capacity, what kind of technologies we need to develop, and it's a constantly evolving planning cycle. When you think about technology, we have to start very early with brand new technologies. Right now, many mining companies are making very strong ESG statements where they're really promising to be completely zero greenhouse gas emissions in between 2030 and 2050, which is a long range. That's 30 years of planning where they're saying they need to take all of the diesel powered equipment out of the equation, and they're looking for something that is zero greenhouse gas emitting. When you think about that gives us a pretty wide range of a horizon to hit, and that will allow us to invest in future technologies to hit those targets. But those are aggressive targets that they've set, and it sets us on our trajectory of what we're going to invest in from a research and development perspective. We're having to do things much sooner than we've ever had before. Many mining companies are asking for electrified equipment by 2027 and 2028. That's a really tight timeline to develop brand new equipment. We're having to develop very differently than we ever had before in order to hit those timelines.
One thing you've heard today, and that is hard to avoid in discussions of the future of manufacturing, is automation. Industrial robotics have been a pillar of mass manufacturing for decades now, but recent breakthroughs in human-robot cooperation are taking productivity to another level and transforming factory jobs. Robots can make manufacturing safer and more efficient, but they also make human work more stimulating and rewarding, says Andrew Bielesbeck, Vice President of Strategy and Innovation at market leader Universal Robots. That'll be crucial for inspiring and hiring the next generation of talent. He talked about AI as a quality inspector, talked about talent attraction and how technology can help alleviate a forecast demand shortage, which is another common theme in this issue and other WTFs. And also how humans working with robots or cobots will help get the best of human capabilities and marry that with the efficiencies and scale that robotics bring to manufacturing. But then staff writer Christopher Good asked him about the consumer DIY market too. After all, there's a degree to which technology like 3D printing could enable us all to be manufacturers to some degree. Beck's answer, I think, applies broadly to many of the topics discussed today. Here's what he said.
There's no doubt that 3D printers have revolutionized the prosumer, the hobbyist, enthusiast space. Robotics could absolutely do the same, both for educational purposes. We've done a lot of work with educational institutions that really learns that robots, it's a very creative way of teaching STEM. But I think you and I can easily imagine we no longer need to hammer, drill, or saw things. You can have your robot to machine whatever you would want to create in your garage as well. So it's certainly a segment that is interesting. I don't know if we will have a robot in every house in the world in the way that we see it today. My take on that is that often technologies will materialize in ways we don't really expect it. But because there's some fundamental problems we still haven't fixed, such as making cars fly. But no one have imagined the innovation that we have going on with smartphones, with digitalization, with wireless communication, and so on. So there's no doubt that intelligence and these robotic capabilities are going to spread to many of the things that we use today, into how kitchen appliances will be, into how tools will be, and so on. So they will actually move a lot closer to us than they do today. If the interesting part is going to be in which way, I think that's for the future for us to tell.
I love that idea that while science fiction gave us lots of ideas that maybe haven't realized, like flying cars, we don't always see some of the things that do materialize. And I think as we think about the future, that's always a good thing to keep in mind. And we've talked a lot today about automation, which could help with labor shortages in the long run, but there's a short-term and maybe also a long-term flip side to that. And we see it in the data. Broadly speaking, people are optimistic about artificial intelligence, but a recent Ipsos study indicates that there's a lot less confidence when it comes to the labor market, with Americans worrying that robotics and automation may decrease job security and increase layoff across sectors, according to Jenny Berg, a VP in Ipsos's public affairs team. She writes that the consensus is that change is coming, whether we're ready for it or not. People see warehouses and industrial workers as particularly vulnerable to these shifts. Nearly half believe that they will have a difficult time adapting to robotic and automation technology. That means brands need to anticipate and communicate about the opportunities this technology presents for industrial workers, from reskilling to retraining. 2 in 5 Americans expect the AI revolution will create new categories or kinds of jobs. Managers need to help workers see themselves in those roles. And it's impossible these days to talk about manufacturing or really any jobs and not also talk about labor unions. After decades of declining union membership, 2023 saw strikes in both traditional labor strongholds like heavy industry and the white-collar sector. Although Ipsos polling shows strong support for organized labor overall, fewer Americans see the value of unions for themselves. How could this play out? Annalise Lohr, a research director in Ipsos's public affairs team, suggests that the labor actions of 2023 signal a tipping point that some workers again feel they need the protections that unions are supposed to offer. This is especially true where CEO pay growth has ballooned to hundreds of times that of the average worker, and as AI intelligence changes the nature of jobs and pay equality. It's an issue that's top of mind for American workers. 66% agree that if a CEO receives a 25% raise, the average worker should get a 25% raise too. As the pay gap widens and automation transforms traditional industries, trade unions could gain new importance. But their blue-collar image may be holding back their relevance in a world that's increasingly digital, entrepreneurial, and fragmented. People play a role in the future and what kind of future we're going to wind up with. And those roles are driven by tensions. The nice thing about doing foresight in the context of a large market researcher is that we can field these questions today and trend them over time as needed. You can see where we are today and track how that changes. The tension segment of WTF received a big upgrade for 2024. In previous issues, we asked these forced choice questions independently and considered where we are today on a tension line and what that future might look like if one of those lines moved. But starting with this issue, we're pitting 2 of them against each other in a standard 2x2 grid. Again, doing this, we can see exactly where we are today, but also how far we'd have to move to wind up in a different future than the baseline. So here's the first one. Pay more versus last longer versus I care where products are made or I don't. Plotting these 2 points, we see where we are today, which sets our baseline scenario. And if things continue as they are along this baseline, we might wind up in a world of manufacturing that looks similar. We care a lot about where products are made, and we say we're willing to pay more for longer lasting goods. If these tensions don't shift, we can expect to continue to see premium American-made goods be somewhat niche and luxe goods, and cheaper goods made overseas be more mass market. But you can see that we're not far off the axis on one dimension here. So say we shifted a few degrees. We could be seeing a world where US manufacturers lean into automation, sacrificing the era of, quote, handmade quality for the ability to produce American-made at scale. That's not great for workers necessarily. The patina of luxe and durability fade, and brands lean more into nationalism as a selling point. ESG becomes more about short supply chain rather than creating jobs or keeping products out of landfills. See, that was fun. Should I try another one? Buying quality over price and price over sustainability. Today, we're in a world where we're on the fence about how much we care about sustainability, but we'll prize quality over price. However, as manufacturers move to meet their own ESG goals, opinions might not matter. They can still make goods sustainably, but will need to message around quality to command that premium price. But we just need a small nudge toward being more open to paying a premium for sustainability. And as we become more aware of the environmental costs of the goods that are made, this seems a plausible quadrant to wind up in. If consumers are willing to pick up some of the tab, or manufacturers find innovative ways to be sustainable and cost-effective. In a world where people are more active, consumers experience economic difficulties and tribalism. There's a large opportunity to help them feel empowered by their choices while contributing to the good of the whole. So Ipsos takes the traditional jobs to be done framework and spins that forward with future jobs to be done. So in a world like this, potential future jobs to be done, including help me live out my values like sustainability and create less waste without being taxed in price. Help me become a prosumer, a consumer who's also a producer to shorten the supply chain. Authentically give me the confidence to know that the goods I buy have been produced ethically and responsibly, and help me afford what I need so I don't accumulate debt. So imagine a world like this, where due to dwindling resources and demand for corporate cost reductions, the supply and manufacturing costs of using waste, recycled, and used ingredients like textiles and hardware are cheaper than extracting virgin materials, ultimately making products more affordable for the consumer. Now, why do we do this? Why do we do What the Future? The answer is always that the more you take some time for yourself to think about the future, whether that's doing a full trends and foresight engagement, or whether that's even just coming to a webinar like this to give yourself a little space over lunch. The more you think about what the world might look like in 5 years or 10, the things that will drive that, the tensions that could shift, the better research you will do today, the more you'll think about the kind of products and services you need to innovate for that future, what that customer experience or user experience might look like. And so again, the more that you imagine possible tomorrows, the better questions you'll ask today. Now, this podcast, or whatever this is, webinar, was made and manufactured outside of Chicago using both humans and a fair amount of AI and other tools. If you missed our last issue and webinar on the future of teens, we're coming back home for the next issue, the future of parenting. That'll drop in a couple of weeks, and we'll be back on with the webinar on the 13th of March. In the meantime, check out future.ipsos.com for all of our issues. You can also sign up for our monthly free newsletter, and the issues are, of course, free as well. So thank you very much for your time. Thanks for coming out for the future of manufacturing. Again, my name is Matt Carmichael. I'm the editor of What the Future, and I'll see you in the future.